The dim glow of the habitat dome's emergency lights flickered across the control room, casting long shadows over scattered tools and half-repaired consoles. Captain Ilara Voss wiped sweat from her brow, her calloused hands steady as she twisted a final bolt into place. At 42, she was the oldest human on the outpost, her dark hair streaked with gray from years under alien suns. Out here on the fringe of the Orion Arm, the Epsilon Eridani station was a speck of defiance against the void, a research hub pieced together from salvaged hulls and sheer will. "Status on the core?" she called, her voice cutting through the hum of failing systems. From the engineering alcove, Jamal Reyes glanced up, his wiry frame hunched over a diagnostic pad. The 28-year-old mechanic had a quick grin that hid his endless calculations, but right now his face was all focus. "Holding at 30%, Cap. The flux capacitor's jury-rigged, but it'll buy us time. Maybe 12 hours if we're lucky." Ilara nodded, stepping back to survey their work. The station orbited a gas giant's moon, a desolate rock called Thaler 7, where humanity had come to mine rare isotopes for the long haul back to Sol. But luck had run dry 3 days ago. A micrometeor storm, unpredicted, brutal, had shredded the solar arrays and cracked the primary reactor shielding. Power flickered like a dying heartbeat, and with it, the comms array went silent. No signal to the relay station, no plea for rescue. Just them, Ilara, Jamal, and 2 others in the core crew. Dr. Lena Kaur emerged from the med bay hatch, her lab coat smeared with coolant residue. The xenobiologist was precise, almost fragile in build, but her eyes held the steel of someone who dissected alien ecosystems without flinching. At 35, she carried the weight of their mission's science, cataloging Thaler's subsurface microbes that could revolutionize terraforming. "Vitals stable," she reported, clipping a scanner to her belt. "No radiation leaks yet, but the air recyclers are straining. We need that backup online before CO2 builds." The fourth, Tomas Hale, paced near the viewport, his broad shoulders tense under the jumpsuit. The pilot was cautious to a fault, his 30-year-old frame built for endurance rather than speed, and he scanned the starry expanse with a frown. Storms cleared, but the debris field's still thick. "If we launch the shuttle blind, we risk hull breach. Better to fix the array first." Ilara leaned against the console, the cool metal grounding her. They were a tight unit, forged in the isolation of deep space. Ilara's steady command, Jamal's ingenuity, Lena's insight, Tomas's vigilance. But the stakes pressed in. Without power, the station would go cold, the isotopes they'd mined worthless, their bodies preserved only as frozen warnings to the next crew. Rescue was a ghost, weeks away even if the relays hummed. "Priorities," Ilara said, her tone even, brooking no debate. Jamal reinforced the core. "Lena, monitor the microbes. Last thing we need is a containment breach in this mess. Tomas, you're with me on the array. We suit up EVA in 10. Short bursts in and out." Jamal saluted with mock gravity, already diving back into wires. "Aye, Cap. I'll make this bucket sing." Lena hesitated, her fingers brushing a sample vial. "The data, saves for later," Ilara cut in gently. "We're no good to anyone as corpses." Tomas met her gaze, nodding once. Outside, the gas giant loomed, its swirling bands a reminder of the indifferent cosmos. They moved as one, clipping helmets and checking seals, the ritual a small anchor in the unraveling night. The airlock cycled with a hiss, expelling them into the vacuum. Stars wheeled above, unblinking witnesses to their fragile push against the dark. Ilara's boots magnetized to the hull, the array's twisted frame glinting under the moon's pale light, a skeletal arm reaching for signals long lost. One panel hung loose, sparks occasionally flaring from exposed circuits. "Easy does it," Tomas murmured over comms, his tether snaking behind him. He pried at a jammed strut, muscles straining against the zero-G drift. Ilara worked the wiring, her gloved fingers deft despite the bulk. A shadow passed overhead, a chunk of debris tumbling lazily, close enough to raise the hairs on her neck. The storm's remnants, a graveyard of metal shards. "Watch your vector. That field's a minefield." "Got it?" Tomas's voice held that edge of caution, but he freed the panel with a grunt, floating it aside. The array's core dish stared back, pitted but intact. She connected the bypass, Jamal's handiwork bridging the gaps. Power hummed faintly through the line, a tentative pulse. For a moment, hope flickered, then a sharp crackle erupted from her suit speakers. Alarms blared in her helmet, electrical surge. The array arced wildly, blue fire licking across the hull. Tomas. Pull back. He spun, tether whipping, but the surge hit first. His suit sparked, systems frying as he tumbled away, yanked by the station's spin. Ilara lunged, firing her thrusters in a desperate arc, the void swallowing her breath. The stars blurred, the fight for connection just beginning its cost. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles whitening against the cold metal. The stars outside the viewport stretched into an endless void, indifferent to the hum of the ship's failing engines. She'd been staring at that same patch of black for hours, willing it to reveal some sign of rescue, but the galaxy remained silent. Her crew, what was left of them, milled about below, their voices a low murmur echoing up from the engineering bay. Liang, the wiry engineer with a perpetual squint from years under dim consoles, wiped grease from his hands on his jumpsuit. It's not just the core, Cap. The auxiliary relays are fried too. We're bleeding power like a sieve. His voice carried that cautious edge, the kind that measured every word against the risk of false hope. Ilara turned, her boots thudding softly on the grated floor. She was the brave one, or at least that's what they told themselves, the one who charged into asteroid fields without flinching. But now, with the ship's hull groaning under the strain of a micrometeor storm's aftermath, even her resolve felt thin. Options, Liang. Give me something real. He hesitated, glancing at Mira, the young navigator huddled over a flickering holomap. Myra's fingers danced across the interface, her witty retorts silenced by the weight of their predicament. She'd been the spark of the team, cracking jokes about alien bounties during long hauls, but the storm had taken their scout drone, leaving them blind in uncharted space. Scavenge the debris field, Liang suggested finally, his eyes narrowing. The meteors punched holes, but they might have left salvageable parts. Risky though, another hit like that and we're done. Ilara nodded, the decision settling like lead in her chest. The external challenge wasn't some grand rival fleet or cosmic beast. It was the quiet sabotage of isolation, a resource shortage that turned every breath into a calculation. They had air for days, but without power the life support would falter, and the cold would claim them long before starvation. Down in the airlock, suits sealed with a hiss, they pushed out into the void. Ilara led, her thrusters firing in controlled bursts toward the glittering remnants of the storm. Shards of rock and twisted metal floated like forgotten relics, catching the distant light of a nebula's glow. One piece, larger than the rest, tumbled lazily, a potential battery core if luck held. Myra's voice crackled over the comms, sharp with tension. Cap, incoming drift. Adjust vector or it'll clip you. Ilara twisted mid-space, the sudden maneuver sending a jolt through her harness. She snagged the fragment with a grapple line, reeling it in as the team converged. But as Liang inspected it, his sigh echoed in their helmets. Corroded. Useless. The first plan backfired, the salvage yielding nothing but frustration. Back aboard, the ship's lights dimmed further, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper of the cost. Time slipping away, the stars watching their futile scramble. Yet in Myra's quick glance at Ilara, a spark of adaptation flickered. Perhaps the nebula's edge held ionized particles they could harvest, a human trick born of desperation. The stakes rose, tangible now, as the hull creaked a warning. Kaler gripped the console edge as the scout ship's hull shuddered, the faint groan of stressed metal echoing through the dim bridge. The nebulous tendrils clawed at their shields, a swirling chaos of ionized gas that painted the viewscreen in bruised purples and angry reds. Beside him, Lyra hunched over the sensor array, her tendrils twitching with frustration, the bioluminescent spots along her arms pulsing erratically. Still nothing, she muttered, her voice a low hiss through the translator. No debris, no signal echoes. It's like they vanished mid-jump. Kaler nodded, his own frills flattening against his neck in unease. The human vessel, the Odyssey, gone without a trace just hours after their last hail. He'd seen the logs. A routine survey mission near the outer rim, probing ancient ruins that predated even the Coalition's archives. Humans always poking at the universe's old wounds. Vex, their pilot, spun in the command chair, his multifaceted eyes glinting under the overhead lights. We push deeper. If the nebula's masking something, we'll punch through. Can't turn back with empty scans, command will have our hides. His words carried the weight of their shared caution, the kind born from cycles of failed expeditions. Kaler appreciated the grit. Vex was the steady one, the anchor in storms like this. But as the ship accelerated, engines humming a deeper tone, a proximity alert blared. Lyra's tendrils shot upright. Anomaly ahead, gravitic distortion. Not natural. The view screen zoomed in, revealing a rift in the nebula's heart, a tear like fractured glass, edges shimmering with unnatural light. Kaler's hearts quickened. This wasn't on any charts. The humans had been heading straight for it. Evade? Vex asked, fingers hovering over the controls, his usual bravado tempered by the reading scrolling past, energy spikes that could shred a hull in seconds. No, Kaler decided, stepping forward. We came for answers. Scan it first. Lyra complied, her probes lancing out into the void. Data flooded back. Residual warp signatures, human in origin, tangled with something older, alien. The rift pulsed as if breathing, and for a moment Kaler swore he glimpsed stars on the other side, familiar constellations twisted wrong. The ship bucked as a gravitational wave hit, throwing Lyra against her station. Sparks flew from a panel, and Vex wrestled the yoke, cursing in their native dialect. Shields at 60%. We're too close, it's pulling us in. Kaler braced himself, mind racing. The humans hadn't vanished, they'd been taken. And now so were they. As the rift loomed larger, swallowing the nebula's glow, a faint transmission crackled through the comms, garbled human voices pleading. Then silence broken only by the ship's alarms. They tumbled into the unknown, the stars outside warping into streaks of light, and Kaler realized the cost. Whatever lay beyond, their return might be the miracle the galaxy never expected. Kaler gripped the edge of the control panel, his tendrils twitching against the unfamiliar hum of the human shuttle's engines. The vessel, a relic pieced together from the ruins of Epsilon Station, shuddered as it pierced the nebula's outer veil. Swirling gases in shades of bruised purple and electric blue battered the hull, but the inertial dampeners, pure human engineering, held firm, absorbing the chaos without a flicker. Beside him, Mira adjusted the scanners, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the readouts like shattered stars. The interference is thicker than projected, she said, her voice a low vibration through the cabin's recycled air. We're blind to anything beyond 100 meters. If the core fragment is down there, we might as well be diving into a black hole. Kaler didn't look up from the navigation overlay, his cautious mind already mapping contingencies. He'd argued against this detour from the main survey route, but the Council's directive was clear: retrieve any viable energy source to power the expedition's faltering reactors. Humanity's departure had left the galaxy's power grids in disarray, and their shuttle's fusion core was down to critical reserves. One wrong turn in this nebula, and they'd drift forever, ghosts among the forgotten human outposts. A proximity alert chimed, sharp and insistent. Mira leaned forward, her claws clicking on the console. Debris field ahead, human wreckage by the signature. Looks like parts of a mining rig. She patched the feed to the main viewport, and there it was, twisted metal lattices blooming like metallic flowers against the nebula's glow, remnants of some long-abandoned extraction op. Kaler eased the throttle back, the shuttle slowing with a groan. Scan for salvage. Anything with shielding or conduits could buy us time. His tendrils flexed, betraying the unease he kept locked behind his analytical facade. Humans had built these things to withstand cosmic fury, yet they'd vanished without a trace, leaving their toys to rust in the void. The shuttle wove through the debris, spotlights cutting swathes of clarity in the murk. Myra's scans pinged a hit, a large fragment drifting lazily, its hull etched with faded insignia, a stylized eagle clutching a wrench. That's a power relay station, she murmured, excitement edging her tone. Intact enough to jury-rig. But it's tangled in the field. We'll need to EVA. Kaler hesitated, the weight of protocol pressing on him. Extravehicular activity in a nebula was suicide for most species. Radiation spikes, microdebris storms. But humans had designed suits for it, layered with adaptive alloys that shed heat like water-off feathers. Their locker held 2 such relics, bulky and scarred but functional. "You take point," he said finally. "I'll monitor from here." No heroics. Mira flashed her mandibles in a grin. "Heroics got us this far, Kaler. Remember the ice hauler on Rigel Prime?" She suited up swiftly, the human fabric sealing around her with a hiss, its servos whirring to accommodate her form. As the airlock cycled, Kaler watched her jet into the void, a silhouette against the nebula's heart. Minutes stretched into tension. Myra's voice crackled over the comm. "Got visual on the relay. It's wedged between 2 girders, looks like the debris shifted during a flare." A pause, then a grunt. "Pulling now." The shuttle's sensors registered the tug, faint vibrations rippling through the frame. Kaler cross-checked the nebula's flux patterns, his display warning of an incoming surge. Mira reading show instability. "Get clear, now." "Almost, got it loose." Her breath came in bursts, the suit's life support straining. Then, a sharp crackle, debris hit. Thrusters offline, Kaler's tendrils slammed the controls. He fired the docking arms, magnetic grapples snaking out to latch onto her position. The shuttle bucked as the surge hit, plasma waves licking the hull like hungry tongues. Alarms wailed, but the human dampeners absorbed the brunt, shielding the cabin from the worst. Mira tumbled into view, the relay clutched in her arms, her suit trailing sparks. The grapples reeled her in, the airlock sealing just as another wave crested. Inside, she slumped against the bulkhead, helmet fogging with exertion. That was too close. Human gear saved my shell. Kaler helped her disconnect, stowing the relay in the engineering bay. Scans showed it viable, enough to recharge their core and extend the mission by weeks. But as he powered it down, a faint data pulse flickered across the interface. Fragmented logs, human voices echoing in static. Captain's log, cycle 47. Nebula's hiding something big, energy signatures off the charts. If we can harness it. The recording cut off, swallowed by interference. Mira peeled off her helmet, her eyes gleaming. They were chasing the same ghost we are. What if this nebula's why they left? Kaler sealed the bay, the shuttle stabilizing as the core hummed back to life. The stars beyond the viewport seemed dimmer now, as if the human's absence had leached the light itself. They pressed on, the relay's glow a fragile beacon in the gathering dark. The dim hum of the shuttle's engines vibrated through the hull as Kale gripped the console, his claws tapping a frantic rhythm. Outside the viewport, the derelict station loomed like a skeletal hand reaching from the void, Earth's old orbital outpost, now a tomb of rusted metal and flickering ghosts. "Scans are clean," he muttered to Lyra, who floated beside him, her fur bristling in the low gravity. "No life signs, but that power surge earlier, it's pulling us in like a magnet." Lyra adjusted her harness, her cautious eyes scanning the readouts. She wasn't one for risks, not after the last expedition where their probe had vanished into a human relics anomaly. "We should orbit and deploy drones first. Rushing in blind is how species go extinct." But Kale, ever the bold one, overrode her with a grin that showed too many teeth. "Drones are slow. We've got the story of the century here, humanity's vanishing act, etched in their junk. Trust the pull." The docking clamp engaged with a jolt, sealing them to the station's airlock. Inside, the air recyclers wheezed to life, pumping in a stale breath of recycled oxygen laced with ozone. Vex, their wiry engineer, trailed behind, toolkit slung over his shoulder, cracking jokes to cut the tension. "If this place eats us, at least we'll die famous." The crew who found the human's final fart in the wind. Lyra shot him a glare, but it softened the knot in her chest. They pushed through the first corridor, boots magnetizing to the deck plates amid drifts of debris, shattered panels, coiled cables like frozen serpents. One striking image burned into Kale's mind. A child's drawing taped to a bulkhead, faded but vivid, showing stick figures waving at stars. No names, no dates, just a simple farewell scrawled in what must have been a young hand. "They left in a hurry," he said, voice low. "Or they were taken." Tension coiled as they reached the core chamber. The power surge originated here, a massive reactor human-designed thrumming erratically. Vex knelt by the control panel, his witty barbs falling silent as he pried open the access hatch. Sparks flew, illuminating runes etched into the machinery, not just tech but art woven with equations that danced like poetry. "This isn't failing," he whispered. "It's waiting. Look, it's rerouting power to the comm array." Lyra's scanner beeped urgently. "Incoming anomaly. Magnetic field spiking. It's going to fry our suits if we don't." Her words cut off as the deck shuddered. Alarms blared, red lights pulsing like a heartbeat. Kale lunged for the manual override, but the panel sparked in his face, singeing his fur. They had seconds before the surge turned the chamber into a plasma storm. Vex yanked a cable free, his hand steady despite the chaos. On 3, Lyra boost the field dampeners. Kale primed the evac thrusters. They moved as one, her caution fueling precise inputs, his grit holding the line. The surge peaked, a wave of energy crashing over them, but the dampeners held, just. As the hum died to a whisper, the comm array lit up, broadcasting a single ancient signal, coordinates, faint and fading, pointing to the galaxy's edge. They stumbled back to the shuttle, suits scorched, hearts pounding. The station receded in the viewport, its lights dimming like a sigh. "We got something," Kale said, collapsing into his seat. But Lyra stared at the drawing's image on her data pad, the weight of absence settling in. Humanity's trail led onward, but at what cost to those who'd followed? The dim glow of the auxiliary console flickered like a dying firefly, casting long shadows across the cramped cockpit of the Endeavour. Captain Alara Voss gripped the armrests of her chair, her knuckles white against the worn leather. She'd always been the steady one, the anchor in storms that had claimed lesser crews, but this relentless cascade of failures, tested her grit like nothing before. The ship's AI, patched together from salvaged human tech and alien scraps, hummed a low warning tone, its voice a synthetic echo of her late engineer's drawl. "Hull integrity at 47%, Captain. Debris field intensifying. Recommend evasive maneuvers." Beside her, Lieutenant Kai Ren shifted in his harness, his fingers dancing over the tactical display. Kai was the quick thinker, the one who turned panic into plans with a wry grin that hid the fear in his eyes. "Evasive? With what thrusters? Half our port side is venting atmosphere." He glanced at her, dark eyes sharp. "We slingshot around that gas giant or we kiss goodbye to the outer rim." Alara nodded, jaw set. The Endeavour was their last bastion, a relic from humanity's exodus, when Earth had burned and the stars had called only to swallow them whole. Now, adrift in the uncharted fringes of the Orion Arm, they chased whispers of a lost colony, a human foothold amid the void. But the nebula they'd entered wasn't just cosmic dust. It was alive with hazards, microsingularities pulling at the ship like invisible hooks. Their first probe had vanished without a trace, and the backup sensors were glitching, painting false stars on the viewscreen. "Plot the trajectory," she said, voice level despite the tremor in her chest. "And reroute power to forward shields. We can't afford another breach." The ship groaned as Kai punched in the commands, the deck vibrating underfoot. Alara's mind raced. 3 crew left after the core meltdown, including Doc Mira in the med bay, patching wounds that wouldn't heal in 0G. They needed that colony, needed proof humanity hadn't faded into myth. The view screen erupted in a blaze of color as they dove toward the gas giant's swirling bands of ammonia clouds. Alarms blared, sharp and insistent. "Singularity spike," Kai shouted, yanking the yoke. The Endeavour bucked, inertial dampeners whining in protest. Alara braced as a chunk of debris, some ancient satellite perhaps, grazed their hull, sparks flying across the console. In the med bay, Mira cursed under her breath, securing the last 4 line on the unconscious ensign. She was the cautious soul, always measuring risks, but caution had its limits when the ship felt like it was unraveling. "Hang in there, kid," she murmured, her hands steady despite the jolts. The comm crackled, Alara's voice clipped. "Mira status? Stable but barely. If we hit another field I'll lose him." Mira wiped sweat from her brow, glancing at the flickering lights. She joined for the adventure, for the camaraderie of survivors, but this chase felt like chasing ghosts. The colony signal was faint, a beacon buried in interference, promising resupply, allies, humanity's echo. Back in the cockpit, the slingshot began. The gas giant loomed, a colossal eye of storms, its gravity well yanking the ship into a screaming arc. Kai's plan was holding, barely. Coming up on the apex, he said, breath hitching. If we time the burn right. Alara watched the readouts, heart pounding. The nebulous tendrils clawed at them, but ahead the signal strengthened, a pulse like a heartbeat. Then, a new alert, incoming vessel, hostile signature. Not debris. Something moved in the haze, sleek and predatory, an alien scout from the fringe clans, drawn by their emissions. Damn it, Kai muttered, fingers blurring. They're locking weapons. Alara's resolve hardened. No surrender, not after everything. Arm countermeasures. We're not going down without a fight. The ship surged, engines roaring defiance as they hurtled toward the unknown, the stars bearing silent witness to humanity's unyielding spark. But as the enemy closed, she wondered if this absence they'd carved in the void would claim them all. The dim glow of the auxiliary console flickered like a dying ember, casting long shadows across the bridge of the Illyria's whisper. Captain Lyra Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, her scaled fingers digging into the worn synth leather. The air recyclers hummed faintly, struggling against the acrid tang of overheated circuits that had seeped in from engineering. Beside her, Engineer Kale hunched over a jury-rigged diagnostic panel, his fur matted with sweat, tentacles twitching in frustration as he rerouted power for the third time. We've got maybe 20 minutes before the core destabilizes, Kale muttered, his voice a gravelly rumble through the translator. He didn't look up, his multiple eyes focused on the scrolling readouts. The plan had been simple: dock with the drifting human freighter they'd stumbled upon in the void, salvage what they could from its databanks to piece together the puzzle of humanity's vanishing. But the ship was a tomb, its corridors laced with automated defenses that had triggered a cascade failure in their own systems upon breach. Lyra glanced at the viewport, where the freighter loomed like a skeletal hand against the starfield. No lights, no signals, just the cold silhouette of SS Vanguard, adrift since the great departure logs had last pinged it centuries ago. Torin, status on the away team? She asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. From the comm station, Torin, the wiry avian scout, tilted his head, feathers ruffling. His beak clicked softly as he adjusted the frequency. They're pinned in the cargo bay. Human security drones, primitive but relentless. Zara's holding them off with the plasma cutter, but she's low on charge. They found something though. A data CORE intact. Lyra's tail flicked against the deck plating. Zara, their xenobiologist, was the cautious one, always probing deeper than protocol allowed. Brave too in ways that bordered on reckless. If anyone could coax secrets from a dead ship's guts, it was her. But the risk? The freighter's orbit was decaying, pulling it toward a debris field that could shred the Whisper if they lingered. Beam them out, Lyra ordered. Priority extraction. Torin's talons tapped urgently. Can't. The drones jammed the transporters with some kind of feedback loop. Old tech but effective. We need to vent the bay's atmosphere to disable them, non-lethal to organics, but it'll fry the drone circuits. Kale snarled, slamming a tentacle against the panel. And flood the section with vacuum? Zara's suit can take it for a minute, but the data core? Human relics like that aren't rated for hard void. It'll corrupt everything. The ship groaned, a metallic shiver running through the hull as another power surge hit. Lyra felt it in her bones. The Whisper was a scavenger vessel not built for combat or deep space heroics. They'd come to the human fringe chasing echoes, tales of a species that had engineered wonders across the galaxy before vanishing without a trace. No war, no cataclysm, just absence. The stars felt it, or so the old probes whispered. Lyra's people, the Vor, had thrived in the aftermath, picking at the bones of human tech. But this freighter was different. Its logs hinted at the why, the final exodus, a deliberate fade into the unknown. Options. Lyra pressed, her eyes narrowing. Torin hesitated, his wings folding tight. We detach and leave them. The core's not worth a life. Kale's tentacles paused. Or we push the engines, slingshot around the debris and buy time for a manual EVA. Risky. One wrong burst and we're debris too. Lyra waited, the weight of command pressing like the void outside. Zara's voice crackled over the comm then, sharp and breathless. Captain, don't wait. The drones are adapting, learning our patterns. But this core, it's not just logs. Blueprints. Schematics for something massive. A gateway maybe. If we lose it, a burst of static cut her off, followed by the whine of energy discharge. Lyra's heart raced. No time for debate. Kale prepped the EVA suits. Torin plot the slingshot. We're not leaving anyone behind. As Kale lumbered toward the suit lockers, cursing under his breath, Lyra stared at the freighter. The humans had built it to endure, to reach across the stars. Whatever drove them to depart, it left tools like this, riddles wrapped in peril. She wondered if they'd known the galaxy would miss them or if the absence was the point. The whisper shuddered into motion, thrusters firing in stuttering bursts. Alarms blared as the debris field loomed closer, chunks of ancient hull glinting like teeth in the dark. Lyra strapped in, her mind racing through contingencies. The plan was fraying already, but grit had carried her crew this far. It would have to carry them through the storm. The dim glow of the auxiliary console flickered like a dying ember in the command chamber, casting long shadows across Kale's scaled face. He hunched over the controls, his claws tapping a frantic rhythm against the hardened interface. The Vanguard, as hull groaned under the strain of the nebula's gravitational eddies, each twist pulling at the seams as if the void itself hungered for them. Beside him, Lyra's multifaceted eyes darted between readouts, her mandibles clicking in quiet calculation. The stabilizers are at 30%, she said, voice steady but edged with the strain of holding back fear. If we push the engines harder, we risk a cascade failure. The debris field ahead, it's denser than scans predicted. Zor, the engineer, snorted from his perch in the lower webbing, tools dangling from his belt like forgotten trophies. Predicted? Those old human charts lied to us from the start. This nebula's a graveyard, not a shortcut. He wiped a smear of lubricant from his feathered crest, his usual wit sharpened by exhaustion. The team had bet everything on this route, slicing through the remnants of Sol's outer veil to reach the core signals, faint echoes of humanity's final broadcasts, whispering promises of tech that could save their crumbling alliance. But the plan to skirt the debris had backfired spectacularly. A rogue asteroid fragment had clipped their port nacelle hours ago, turning what should have been a swift transit into a desperate limp. Kale straightened, his broad shoulders rolling as he surveyed the holographic display. Swirling clouds of ionized gas painted the chamber in hues of bruised purple, and at the center the pinpoint of Earth's ghost signal pulsed erratically. They were close, agonizingly so, but the cost was mounting. "We adapt or we drift," he murmured, echoing the human adage they'd pieced together from fragmented archives. It was grit like that, unseen yet indelible, that had drawn them here. Humans hadn't conquered the stars with raw power, they'd woven ingenuity into every shadow, leaving tools and traps that outlasted empires. Now those same relics threatened to claim the Vanguard. Lyra's claws hesitated over the navigation panel. Rerouting power to shields might buy us time, but it'll blind our sensors. We could miss the safe passage entirely. Her caution had saved them before, pulling the ship from black hole fringes and pirate ambushes, but today it felt like chains. Zor leaped down, landing with a soft thud, and jabbed a talon at the console. Or we use their old trick, deploy the auxiliary drones to map the field in real time. Humans didn't fear the unknown, they poked it with sticks. He grinned, but his eyes betrayed the lie. The drones were their last reserves, and losing them meant no margin for error on the approach to the inner system. The ship shuddered again, a deep vibration rattling through the deck plates. Alarms blared in staccato bursts, red lights painting their faces in warning. Kale gripped the armrest, feeling the pulse of the engines falter. Outside, through the viewport, a massive chunk of ancient wreckage tumbled into view, twisted metal from some long-forgotten war, etched with faded insignia that might have been human. It loomed, indifferent, as the nebula's winds herded it toward them. "Do it," Kale ordered, voice cutting through the din. "Lyra, shields up." Zor launched the drones. We thread this needle or humanity's secrets stay buried. Zor moved like a shadow, his fingers flying across the deployment sequence. The drones ejected with a hiss, tiny sparks vanishing into the chaos. Lyra diverted the power flows, her mandibles grinding as efficiency dropped to critical levels. The Vanguard listed, engines whining in protest, but the holographic map began to resolve, paths weaving through the debris like veins in marble. For a moment hope flickered. Kale watched the signals converge, imagining the humans who had charted this hell first. Not gods but stubborn souls who turned peril into progress. Then the first drone winked out. Static crackled across the feed, followed by a second, then the third. Interference Lyra hisset, her komposure kraking. The nebulous frying them, worse than we thought. Zor's feathers bristled. Pull back. We can't. But the wreckage was upon them, a colossal girder scraping the hull with a screech that echoed through the ship. Sparks erupted from a nearby panel, and the lights dimmed to emergency red. Alarms wailed relentless. Kale lunged for the manual override, yanking levers with brute force. The ship veered, narrowly avoiding a fatal collision, but the cost hit hard. A secondary breach in the cargo hold, venting atmosphere and supplies into the void. Precious oxygen recyclers gone. Their air would last days, not weeks. As the Vanguard stabilized, limping toward the clearer space beyond, Kale met his crew's gazes. Lyra's eyes dimmed with unspoken regret. Zor's wit had fled, replaced by grim resolve. The stars ahead gleamed mockingly, humanity's absence a heavier weight than any debris. They'd survived, but the gamble had scarred them, reminding them that even echoes of the departed could draw blood. Kale gripped the rusted railing, his claws scraping against the flaking metal as the derelict station groaned beneath them. The air recyclers had long since failed, leaving a stale tang that clung to his fur like regret. Below, in the cavernous atrium, the human relics sprawled in silent accusation, twisted scaffolds of what they called skyscrapers, now half swallowed by creeping vines that had breached the hull from some forgotten terraformer mishap. Lyra's scanner hummed faintly in her paw, its light flickering like a dying star. "This way," she whispered, her voice cautious as ever, eyes darting to the shadows where the emergency lights sputtered. The engineer in her hated the unpredictability of human design. Everything here seemed built for chaos, not efficiency. Zeth, trailing behind with his usual lopsided grin, hefted the makeshift pry bar fashioned from a shattered bulkhead panel. "If we don't find that core relay soon, we'll be breathing vacuum by dawn cycle. Or whatever passes for dawn in this floating tomb." They pressed on, boots echoing softly against the grated floor. The challenge had started simple. A rival salvage crew from the Vexery Collective had jammed their shuttle's docking clamps, stranding them while claiming first rights to the station's fusion cells. But the real threat lurked in the failing power grid, random surges that could fry their suits or worse, trigger a cascade failure in the Atmo shields. Kale's team needed the relay to bypass the locks, but the humans' labyrinthine wiring had turned it into a hunt through a maze of forgotten corridors. A sharp crack split the air. Lyra froze, her tail stiffening. That wasn't us. From the far end of the hall, a panel burst open, sparks flying like angry fireflies. Zeth lunged forward, witty retort dying on his lips as a section of ceiling buckled, slamming down in a shower of debris. Kale shoved Lyra aside just in time, the impact jarring his shoulder. Dust billowed, thick and choking, and for a moment, the only sound was their ragged breaths filtering through masks. "Plan B it is," Kale growled, hauling himself up. His bravery was no reckless charge, it was the steady pull that kept them moving. They rerouted through a maintenance shaft, Lyra's scanner mapping the tangle of conduits overhead. Human ingenuity shone even in decay. These paths were narrow, meant for their smaller frames, but laced with redundant failsafes that hummed faintly, defying the centuries. Zeth wedged the bar into a jammed hatch, muscles straining. "You know, if the humans built this to last forever, they succeeded. Too bad it hates us." The hatch gave with a screech, revealing a chamber alive with erratic blue glows. The core relay loomed at the center, a monolithic cylinder etched with faded script, "Resilience Protocol active." But as Lyra approached, a surge rippled through the floor, lights strobing wildly. Alarms wailed, distant at first, then building to a piercing keen. "It's overloading," she said, fingers flying over her tools. The initial plan, hotwire the relay for a quick power siphon, backfired spectacularly. The human safeguards interpreted their probe as an invasion, locking down sectors and venting auxiliary air. Stakes sharpened. One wrong move and the chamber would seal, suffocating them while the Vexery laughed from their secured bays. Kale scanned the readouts, mind racing. "We adapt." "Zeth, brace that conduit, reroute the surge through the outer hull." Zeth nodded, no quips now, just action. Together they worked, Lyra splicing wires with precision while Kale held the flickering panel steady. Sweat beaded under his suit, the air growing thinner. A final spark jumped, then steadied. The relay purred to life, not with a boom but a reluctant hum. They emerged into the atrium, relay clutched like a trophy, but the station trembled, a lingering aftershock from the surge. Cracks spiderwebbed the viewport, stars winking through like eyes watching their escape. The Vexery would come soon, but so would the full cascade. Humanity's absence echoed in every strained bolt, a void that pulled at them even as they ran. The dim glow of the auxiliary console flickered like a dying ember, casting long shadows across the bridge of the Vanguard's echo. Kale gripped the edge of the panel, his tendrils twitching with frustration as the latest simulation sputtered to a halt. The Rift simulation, human-designed of course, had promised stability, but now it warped and tore at the edges, devouring the virtual probes they'd sent through. "This isn't working," he muttered, his voice a low rumble through the humid air recyclers. Beside him, Lyra paced, her crystalline facets catching the light in sharp, anxious refractions. She was the cautious one, always double-checking the data streams, but even her precision couldn't bridge the gaps left by the humans' abrupt departure. "We adapt or we fracture," Thorn interjected from the navigation nook, his furred fingers flying over the haptic controls. The burly Vorin was all grit, his eyes narrowed in that unyielding focus that had kept them alive through 3 system jumps already. But this time the stakes clawed deeper. The real rift loomed just beyond the hull, a tear in spacetime born from the humans' final experiment, one they'd abandoned without a shutdown protocol. If it destabilized fully, it wouldn't just swallow their ship, it would ripple out, erasing the fragile trade lanes that bound the quadrant. Kale felt the weight of it, the absence of those unpredictable primates who jury-rigged solutions from scrap and sheer will. No speeches now, just the hum of failing systems and the faint vibration of the rift's pull. Lyra halted her pacing, her voice chiming like struck glass. "The human logs mention a feedback loop, something about harmonic resonance. We ignored it last cycle because the power draw was too high." She projected the schematic, a web of glowing lines that twisted like veins. Thorn grunted, leaning in, his breath fogging the display. "Then we overload it. Force the resonance to collapse the tear from within." Kale hesitated, his mind racing through the risks. A surge like that could fry the core, stranding them in the void. But the alternative? Watching entire worlds blink out, their populations none the wiser to the humans' unseen legacy crumbling. They worked in tense silence, rerouting power from life support to the emitters. Alarms blared softly at first, then insistent as the ship groaned under the strain. Thorn sealed the overrides with a decisive tap, his claws clicking against the keys. "On your mark." Lyra's facets dimmed slightly, a sign of her nerves, but she nodded. Kale initiated the pulse, the bridge lights dimming to a pulse that matched the rift's ominous throb outside. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the schematics lit up, the feedback loop igniting in a cascade of blue fire across the displays. The ship bucked, hull plates creaking as the rift responded, contracting then flaring wider. Kale's tendrils locked in place, holding him steady against the inertial dampener's whine. "It's fighting back," Lyra said, her tone edged with urgency, not panic. Thorn barked a laugh, short and fierce. "Good. Means it's feeling us." They adjusted on the fly, Thorn tweaking the frequencies while Lyra monitored the strain on the engines. Sweat beaded on Kale's scales, the air growing thick with ozone. The humans had built this with margins for error, for their own reckless improvisations. But without them, every choice felt like threading a needle in a storm. As the rift began to stabilize, edges smoothing, the pull easing, the console sparked, a warning light flashing red. Secondary systems offline. They'd bought time but at a cost. The Echoist jump drive was compromised, locking them to sublight until repairs. Kale exhaled, the tension uncoiling just enough to breathe. Outside the viewport, the stars steadied, their light no longer warped by the tear. But in the quiet that followed, he couldn't shake the echo of absence. The human's ingenuity a ghost in the machine, their departure a scar that no adaptation could fully heal. Thorn clapped a paw on his shoulder, solid and reassuring. We held. That's what matters. Lyra already pulled up repair schematics, her facets brightening. Forward, always forward, into the stars that still whispered of what was lost. The dim glow of the auxiliary console flickered like a dying ember, casting long shadows across the bridge of the Endeavor's echo. Captain Alara Voss gripped the armrest of her chair, her knuckles white against the worn leather. The ship's hull groaned under the strain of the gravitational pull from the rogue asteroid field, each fragment a silent assassin hurtling through the void. Her crew, only 3 now after the losses in the core breach, huddled around the holographic display, their faces etched with the exhaustion of weeks adrift. Status on the thrusters? Ilara's voice cut through the hum of failing systems, steady despite the knot in her gut. Lieutenant Kai Ren, the engineer with his perpetual squint from years staring into fusion cores, wiped sweat from his brow. Patching the auxiliary lines, but the main manifolds fried. We got maybe 10% output. Enough to nudge us, not evade. Beside him, Dr. Mira Solon, the xenobiologist whose calm demeanor had held them together through the evacuation of the colony, traced a finger over the scan data. The field's densest cluster is shifting. Collisions are creating debris waves. If we don't clear it in the next cycle, we'll be pulverized. Ensign Theo Grant, the youngest, paced behind them, his youthful bravado cracked but not broken. We breathe shallow after this. Myra's fingers flew across her tablet, the hologram warping into a web of predicted paths. It's tight. The well's unstable, could shear us apart if the calculations are off by a degree. Theo stopped pacing, his face paling. And if we miss, we're the last ones. No backup, no colonies waiting. Ilara met his gaze, her own resolve a anchor in the storm. Then we make it count. Humanity didn't conquer the stars by playing safe. The ship shuddered as the first reroute kicked in, lights dimming to a sullen red. Alarms blared a warning chorus, but Ilara silenced them with a swipe. Outside, the asteroid field loomed larger, a chaotic ballet of stone and ice. Kai sealed the last connection, and the thrusters coughed to life, a feeble push against the inexorable tide. Engaging maneuver, Mira announced, her voice even as she fed the coordinates to the NAV core. The echo lurched, gravity twisting in Ilara's stomach as they dove toward the gravitational maw. Debris pinged off the shields like hail on tin, each impact a reminder of the thin veil between them and oblivion. Theo braced against the console, muttering calculations under his breath, while Kai monitored the strain gauges, his squint deepening into a grimace. A larger fragment clipped the port wing, the jolt sending tools skittering across the deck. Ilara braced, tasting blood from a bitten lip. Hold course. Myra's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted. Fractions of a second, lives in the balance. The ship arced through the well, momentum building like a whip's snap. For a heartbeat, the stars aligned, the field parting just enough. Then the core whined, a high-pitched keen that built to a scream. Overload. Kai shouted, lunging for the manual cutoff. Too late. The explosion rocked them, secondary systems failing in cascade. Ilara's world tilted, darkness nibbling at the edges of her vision as auxiliary power surged back online, barely. They cleared the field, tumbling into open space, but the cost hung heavy. Life support flickered, and the NAV display showed their trajectory veering toward an uncharted nebula. No direct path home, not anymore. Ilara straightened, surveying her crew. Bruised, breathing hard, but alive. The stars outside seemed to pulse with a newfound emptiness, as if mourning what they'd nearly lost. Patch what you can, she said softly. We're not done yet. In the quiet that followed, the weight of their isolation settled deeper, a shadow no clever fix could banish. But in that shadow their resolve burned brighter, a human spark against the cosmic dark. Ilara's claws trembled as she keyed the final sequence into the ancient console, the holographic display flickering like a dying star against the cavern's damp walls. The air hummed with latent energy, thick and electric, carrying the faint scent of ozone and something earthier, relics of a world long silent. Beside her, Kor, the explorer whose scars mapped forgotten battlefields, gripped his scanner tight, his broad shoulders tense under the weight of what they'd uncovered. "This is it," he muttered, voice gravelly from days without rest. "If the humans' grid fails now, we're ghosts in their machine." Thrin, ever the sharp-tongued mechanic, snorted from her perch on a rusted crate, tools dangling from her belt like forgotten metals. "Ghosts? Please. We'd be vapor. But hey, if their ingenuity holds, maybe we'll join the club of species they dragged kicking into the stars." Her words cut the tension, a spark in the gloom, but her eyes, wide and unblinking, betrayed the fear gnawing at her core. They'd come to this forsaken archive on the edge of the Orion Arm, chasing whispers of humanity's exodus, only to find their final safeguard. A network of automated beacons woven into the fabric of galactic stability, invisible hands that had quelled solar flares, redirected asteroid swarms, and balanced the fragile equilibria of a dozen systems. All without a single transmission begging for thanks. The console beeped, a low pulse that echoed through the chamber. Ilara leaned in, her fur prickling as data streams unfolded, blue veins of light tracing paths across the void. The challenge had been brutal, a cascade failure in the core relay, triggered by a rogue pulsar's interference, threatening to unravel the web. Their first attempt, a brute force reroute using Thrin's jury-rigged amplifiers, had backfired spectacularly, frying half their equipment and sealing them in this tomb of twisted metal and forgotten code. Now, with Kor's maps and Ilara's translations pieced together from human relics, scraps of novels, engineering logs, even crude jokes scribbled in margins, they'd adapted. Borrowed the human's own principle, redundancy layered with improvisation, turning the behemoth's weakness into a symphony of echoes. Sweat beaded on Kor's brow as the grid stabilized, the holograph blooming into a radiant lattice. Alarms silenced one by one, the pulsar's fury deflected not by raw power, but by a clever deflection array mimicking human deflector shields, primitive tech, yet elegant in its simplicity. "It's holding," Ilara whispered, her voice cracking with relief. The chamber warmed, vents hissing as life support cycled back online, bathing them in artificial dawn. But triumph soured as the final log entry scrolled into view, unbidden. A human voice, grainy and warm, crackled through the speakers. "Log 47 Omega. If anyone's hearing this, we didn't stick around for the applause. The math checked out, departure viable, legacy locked in. Keep the lights on, yeah? Earth's a memory, but the stars, they're yours now." Static swallowed the words, leaving silence heavier than the rock overhead. Thrin slid down from her crate, tools clinking softly. "They just left. Fixed everything and bailed. No fanfare, no monuments." She kicked at a loose panel, frustration etching her face, but there was admiration too, grudging and deep. Kor holstered his scanner, staring at the glowing grid. "We felt it though. The absence. Systems stabilizing without explanation, wars averted by lucky alignments. They were the grit in the gears, the unspoken grit that kept us from crumbling." He placed a hand on Ilara's shoulder, a rare gesture, his bravery yielding to quiet awe. Ilara nodded, deactivating the console with a final tap. The lights dimmed, but the web endured, a silent testament pulsing across the galaxy. They emerged from the cavern into the ship's airlock, the void beyond dotted with unfamiliar constellations, human-shaped voids in the stellar tapestry. No parades awaited them, just the weight of inheritance, a camaraderie forged in shadows, and the knowledge that some triumphs echoed eternally, unseen but unforgotten. As the engines thrummed to life, carrying them homeward, Ilara glanced back at the archive's silhouette against the stars. Humanity's departure had carved a scar in the cosmos, but in its wake the universe breathed freer, steadier, alive with possibility.